text today comes from Genesis 32, 22 through 32. And my title is, God is an unsafe God. God is an unsafe God. So Jacob wrestles at Peniel. The same night he got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything he had. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go, unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans, and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask me my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore to this day the Israelites do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the hip socket, because he struck Jacob on the hip socket at the thigh muscle. The word of God for the people of God. Join me in a word of prayer. God, thank you so much that we have the opportunity to come together as a class and preach. God, I know that our blessings are increased tenfold because of all the sermons that we are able to listen to today. God, allow me to speak your word, and God, let me be obedient to your text. In Jesus Christ, amen. So God is an unsafe God. Anthony Robles was born without a right leg. Instead of wearing a prosthetic leg the rest of his life, Robles decided at the age of 3 to move around with just one leg. This meant strengthening other parts of his body in order to make up for his missing limb. The result of this courageous decision was his developing enormous upper body strength. He became so strong that in 6th grade, he set the record for most push-ups by anyone to have ever attended his school. Think about that. Generations had come before him, but no one could match his amazing strength. Perhaps you have heard of Robles recently in the news, and this would have been recently 2 weeks ago. Despite his missing one leg, Robles is a world-class collegiate wrestler. In his senior year at Arizona State, Robles finished 36-0 and defeated the previous NCAA wrestling champion by a whopping score of 7-1 in the final. Robles could have spent his life in a wheelchair, and no one would have thought any less of him. At such a young age, though, Robles decided to take initiative and make sure that he would not have to depend on others to provide him strength. Anthony Robles has only one leg, but he has a lion's heart that makes him equal, if not better, to many who go about life on 2 legs. Jacob is figuratively missing his right leg in this narrative. He is stuck between a rock and a hard place, unable to go back in his journey away from Laban, and unsure of what his journey ahead towards Esau may entail. Jacob is heading south, and Esau is heading north. The two are on a crash course towards each other, and it seems the conflict that started with Jacob stealing Esau's birthright is about to end with blood. In the beginning of chapter 32, Jacob cries out to God and asks that he remember his promise to Jacob. After his prayer, Jacob takes matters into his own hands and sends a wealth of gifts ahead of himself to Esau, hoping that he can buy his brother's forgiveness. Jacob knows that he is guilty of a great wrong, and it is here that we meet this noble patriarch, alone on the one side of the Jabbok River after he has sent his family and belongings ahead of himself. Jacob has wrestled his whole life, first with Esau in the womb, then wrestling the birthright away from Esau, and through his figurative wrestling match with Laban for Rachel. These wrestling matches have prepared him for what is about to come. the ultimate wrestling match with God. We all must be willing to wrestle with God and the promises he has for us. And our wrestling is with an unsafe God and a good God. You can wrestle with God because God doesn't want you to complacently sit back on the sidelines. Jacob cannot bear to wait any longer for his meeting with his brother Esau. This fact is highlighted because Jacob chooses to send his hard-won family across the tumultuous Jabbok in the night. This is very dangerous. Jacob is left alone on the opposite shore of the river. It is here that Jacob is at his most vulnerable, here where no one can hear Jacob if he is attacked in the night. Jacob seems to be asking for trouble. God steps in and provides encouragement, although it is an unsafe encouragement and a testing of physical strength. God comes in the form of a strange man. The text highlights the fact that the man's appearance is sudden. If this were a movie, Jacob would be seen sitting alone on the river in one shot. The next shot would pan across the river into the lonely dark. Finally, the camera would return to Jacob, who is suddenly wrestling with an unknown man. We as readers should be troubled by this sudden turn of events, and no doubt Jacob was taken aback, wondering if this is Esau coming after him when he is alone and vulnerable. Jacob is unable to cross the river and face what his brother Esau has in store for him until he can pass this wrestling match test of God. The match will go on through the night, and neither Jacob nor the mysterious man will give up until dawn breaks the two up. I'm sure you have all seen The Lion King and the awe-inspiring story of the young lion cub Simba. I can't believe that this movie came out in 1994 when I was 8 years old. It seems like only yesterday when I would put in the VCR my worn copy of this movie and watch it for the 30th time. The story of The Lion King is regularly used as a type scene in Hollywood, although with an animal twist. A favored young prince is destined to receive a kingdom, but a tragic turn of events keeps the young prince from becoming the rightful king. Simba's hated Uncle Scar is the antagonist who keeps him from realizing his place in the circle of life. Scar arranged events in order that Simba's father, Mufasa, would be murdered. Simba would be exiled, and Scar would become the next king of the lions. Scar turns the once celebrated pride of lions into a beggar's troop who can't easily find their next meal as they are accustomed to doing under the leadership of Mufasa. Simba is off in another country, eating bugs with a meerkat and warthog. Finally, Simba comes of age and is ready to take back the kingdom that is rightfully his. This can only come through a struggle with Simba and Scar. Simba is about to outduel his uncle Scar and take back the Pride lands. It is only after this test of struggling with Scar that Simba is able to regain his kingdom. It did not come easy, but it was worth it. In the same way, Jacob is not allowed to cross the river until he has struggled and been tested by God. This struggle is not an easy one either. The two men wrestle throughout the night, literally for hours. I have wrestled playfully with some of my friends, and sometimes unplayfully, as it can turn out. It is only after a couple of minutes that I become tired and unable to continue. Imagine the sort of strength it takes to continue wrestling for 4, 5, or even 6 hours. Jacob certainly is shown to have superhuman strength because he is able to bring the wrestling match with God to a draw. Jacob recognizes that he can get a blessing out of this struggle, so he puts his whole being into the wrestling match and does not let go of God. You may wrestle with God because you desire a blessing, but God will surprise you with more than you expect. God, in the form of the mysterious man who wrestled with Jacob, recognizes towards the end of the wrestling match that he is unable to prevail against Jacob. To bring the match to its conclusion, the man lightly touches Jacob's hip, causing it to come out of socket. Ouch. Not only does this show the superhuman ability of the mysterious stranger, but imagine the awful pain this would have caused Jacob. No doubt there are weaker humans out there who would pass out from such incredible pain, but this is not so for Jacob. He sees that he is unable to move with his dislocated hip, so he does the only thing he can do. He grabs hold of the man and doesn't let him go. This forces a draw with the man because he is unable to come out of the powerful grip of Jacob. What happens when an immovable object comes in contact with an unstoppable force? This is Jacob and the mysterious superhuman man. Jacob desires a blessing from the man and will not let go until he gets it. The mysterious man eventually obliges, but he goes even further by renaming Jacob. The name Jacob essentially means trickster. So the God-man is communicating to Jacob that he no longer needs to slink in the shadows and trick people because he has striven with both God and man and come out victorious. Jacob can be confident that he has God on his side, and he no longer needs to worry about such things as to whether or not Esau would kill him or forgive him. His prayer at the beginning of chapter 32 that God remember his promises to Jacob is answered. Jacob becomes Israel. And Jacob can rest assured that God will strive for him and his people, since the name of Israel can mean God strives. Put 'em up, are the words of the cowardly lion in The Wizard of Oz. He tells the Scarecrow and Tin Man all the ways he can fight and best them. His bravado leads him to go after the most beloved and tiniest member of the troop, Toto. The seemingly courageous lion is stopped in his tracks from bullying any further by a well-placed slap by Dorothy. The poor cowardly lion dissolves into tears and clutches his face as if he has been punched by a 300-pound man. Dorothy chastises the lion and tells him he is nothing but a coward and a bully in his trying to go after Toto. Eventually, this lion joins the troop in their search for the magical Wizard of Oz, a wizard who is able to solve all of their deficiencies. In the last scene of the movie, the traveling troop figures out that the Wizard of Oz is nothing but an imposter. They also figure out that the qualities they thought they lacked were there all along, and they were manifested in their struggle and defeat of the Wicked Witch of the West. The cowardly lion already had his nerve and did not need the Medal of Courage awarded to him by the wizard. In other stories about Jacob in Genesis, we see a man who will use any method, whether good or bad, in seeking advantage. He uses Esau's hunger to gain a blessing. He tricks Laban into giving him the best of his flock. It can seem that Jacob is a little cowardly in seeking his own advantage. The name change of Jacob, just like any other name change in the Bible, is important also for the changing of Jacob's identity. God is a God of blessing, but he does not bless Jacob right when he asks it, but changes Jacob's identity so that he can see that he needs to be courageous in order to pass the test with Esau and continue on into Canaan and the place where God promised he would go. Jacob is no longer the cowardly trickster, but the straightforward and resolute fighter who is able to get over his fear of Esau and continue on his journey. Jacob receives this new identity and blessing because he struggled with God. Something that is not easy, but something that was rewarding. God is a God who allows Jacob to win, but at a cost. God is an unsafe God, but he is also a good God. The mysterious man who turns out to be God recognizes that the night will soon lift, and Jacob will be able to see him in his full identity and glory. This cannot occur because Jacob would surely die from the experience. To see God in his full glory would be unsafe. God is a good God who recognizes the danger that Jacob is in. Jacob has passed God's test. So God gives Jacob a new name and blesses him so that he can get away before the light comes. Jacob is bold when he asks for the name of the man who is God, but he is rebuffed because God does not choose to give his name until the time of Moses. God recognizes that doing so would be too much for Jacob to handle. God has limited himself in this encounter with Jacob because he is a good God and loves Jacob. He wants to show Jacob that he has nothing to fear with his encounter with Esau. The text is ambiguous and never giving a clear point at which God leaves and Jacob continues on his way again, showing that God is wrapped in mystery and cannot be fully explained. Aslan is not a tame or a safe lion. In C.S. Lewis's book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the kids are holed up in Mr. Beaver's hut, talking about the great Aslan and his mighty deeds in Narnia. Lucy mistakes who Mr. Beaver is talking about and asks if Aslan is a man. Mr. Beaver replies, Aslan is a lion, the great lion. Susan asks if such a lion is safe to be around. Who could blame her? I know I wouldn't feel safe speaking to or being around a talking lion. Mrs. Beaver tells Susan that she is correct to feel uneasy about meeting such a great lion. Lucy wants to know if he is safe to be around. In a classic statement, Mr. Beaver replies, "Safe? Don't you hear what Mrs. Beaver tells you? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you." This passage with the wrestling match between Jacob and God shows exactly how God is not safe to be around.